Yes, boss. Good morning. My name is Giovanni Broussard, and I work for the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. Quite often I'm asked why the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime actually attends events that deal with environmental issues. And the reality is that over the past few years, decade probably, we have noticed an increase of criminal activities in several environmental sectors, from the forestry to the wildlife to the fishery. And certainly we have identified a high risk of criminal activities, and in particular organized crime, also in relation to the waste sector. So we were particularly pleased when the UN Environment approached us to ask us to work together on this session to discuss a topic that is really crucial and is becoming more and more relevant in this region. The transboundary movement of plastic and plastic scrap has been booming in the past few years in this region. According to some statistics, actually in the ASEAN region, the increase of imports in plastic has been remarkable, way above 100%. Many governments have started to adopt much stricter regulations, much stricter legal frameworks, and that has changed certainly the dynamics in the movements of transboundary movements of plastic waste. Now, these changes bring the need of trying to understand a little bit better what is it that drives these movements, and how the enforcement can effectively succeed in identify illegal movements, try to understand who are the organizations, the structures behind the illegal movements, and try to ensure legality and sustainability in this field. So that's why we're here today with a panel of government officials, representatives of the academic world, of international organizations, to actually try to unpack some of the complexities related to this environmental specific sector, and also try to understand how much what is happening in this sector is relevant also for security purposes. How much of crime and criminal activities are affecting the regulations that are being adopted by more and more Asian countries. So we will cover a number of topics during this session. We will talk about data on transboundary movement of plastic waste. We will talk about some of the challenges for plastic recycling. We will talk about the flaws of the current regulatory system for trading plastic, the implication of some of the proposed amendments and ongoing amendments of the Basel Convention. And then we will talk about examples of illegal trade with the specific case study from Thailand. We will have 3 presentations in total. Every presentation will have a duration of 10 minutes, and they will be followed by comments by 2 of our discussants that I will present soon. After these presentations, we will open the floor for any question from the audience. And although I realize that this room may look a little bit intimidating, I really encourage you to just raise your hand and share your thoughts and make your question to our distinguished panel of speakers and discussants. So without any further ado, then I would like to introduce the first speaker of the day, of this session, is Mr. Michikatsu Kojima, who works as a senior economist at the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN. Prior to working for AREA, he was a chief senior researcher at the Institute of Developing Economies in Japan. He served in different functions within working groups related to the Basel Convention, to the Green Industry Platform in UNIDO. He holds a Master of Science and Agriculture and Resource Economics from the University of California, Berkeley. Mr. Kojima, please.
Hello, I'm very honored to make a presentation today. I want to talk about a kind of an overview of international trade of plastic waste. I put a long slide in the first one, so I start from the third one. In 2008, the total international trade of the plastic waste reached 7.3 million tons. In 2 years back, it was about the 14 million tons. So the volume of the plastic waste traded, reduced a lot, like more than 40%. And in 2016, China is a major importer of plastic waste. More than half of the plastic waste are imported by China. But in 2008, the top importer was Malaysia. And next one is Hong Kong, and the Netherlands, Thailand, so on. So, but the volume is the total volume is totally different. This is a kind of the trend of the import by Asian countries. The line, I think red line, is import by China. So after the second quarter of the 2017, China reduced a lot of the import of plastic waste. And on the other hand, some countries, especially in Southeast Asian countries, increase the import of plastic waste. And the peak was from March to May 2018. After that, Southeast Asian countries also tried to strengthen the import regulation. So the import volume is getting lower. And right now, it's almost similar to the before China introduced the restriction on plastic waste. So this is the statistic from the exporter side. I mean, I got the data from EU 15 countries, major 15 countries, and United States and Japan. And the export of plastic waste reduced a lot, almost 40% reduced the plastic waste export from these developed countries. Okay, and there are some kind of good, how to say, the recycling system also. Plastic waste exported to China, and they produce some textile from, like this is the case of PET bottles. China import the PET flake, and they made a textile from such kind of the materials. So, but there are some pollution problem from the import. like no pollution control from the, I would say, in the process of washing plastic waste, and also there are some mismanagement of the storage of plastic waste, and some part of plastic waste cannot be recycled in some destination. So these contribute a kind of marine plastic debris issues also. Okay. And maybe I will talk about the kind of the challenges of plastic recycling industry in the later in the discussion session. So I just want to show the kind of the overview of international trade of plastic waste in this presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Kojima. So we will certainly hear from you more during the discussion time, but this was a useful introduction in terms of understanding a little bit the volumes that we're talking about, the imports and the exports, and the changes in Asia, especially as of 2018. So we will now continue this discussion with our next speaker, Ms. Maria Zacona, who is an expert, a senior expert on waste management at the GREED Arendal. She has over 13 years of experience in this field. She holds a degree in environmental engineering. She's got direct experience in managing projects related to solid waste and resource management. And she's been involved in the International Solid Waste Association, where actually she founded the Woman of Waste initiative within the association. So without any further ado, Ms. Maria, please, the floor is yours.
And the microphone. Thank you for inviting us being here and talking for such a very important global issue and a very significant program, especially in countries of Asia. I would like first to apologize myself if you don't hear me very well. I'm just overcoming a flu, and probably I will interrupt from time to time. My presentation is going to be about controlling transboundary trade in plastic waste. This is a policy brief that has been developed by GREED Arendal under the scope of supporting the Norway proposal on amending the Basel Convention on transboundary movement of hazardous waste to also to include the trade of plastic waste. My presentation is going to focus on three specific points: on the flows of the current global recycling model, the impacts of the plastic scrap transboundary movement, and I will provide some recommendations. Yeah, that's right. Thank you. So the global plastic industry is very well established, and since the 1950, billions of polymers have entered our markets, different types of polymers with different applications. Most of them have been introduced in the packaging sector. And although the global plastic industry has performed really well, however, we see that the performance of the plastic recycling sector is very, very low. Only 9% of global plastic has been recycled so far. 12% is sent for incineration, and the rest is either sent to landfills or mismanaged and dump sites, litter the environment and marine environment as well. So, what is the drawback in our recycle sector? The drawback is based on 4 global systemic failures. We do have in the plastic sector a lot of different materials of different characteristics that we very well known of that, but most of them need different technologies to recycle, and also they have different patterns of consumptions. The second failure of our global system is that the infrastructure in place for the waste management in terms of collection of this plastic and also in terms of the recycling industry, it's still insufficient, especially when it comes to countries of the global south. The third failure of our system, it has to do with the fact that we don't have functioning markets for secondary materials in place. And the fourth and most important is that we don't hold the knowledge in the different stages of our value chain for plastics. So to become more specific, there are drivers that they drive the transboundary movement of plastic and also the leakage of plastics in the environment after being collected. There are drivers on policy level, on the regulation level, on technical level and economic level. For instance, when it comes to the policy level, there are drivers of plastic leakage, such as the fact that in many developed countries, they have set very high recycling targets. And this, in combination with the fact that these countries, they don't have all the recycling capacity in place, this drives these countries to heavily rely on the transboundary movement of plastics to other countries, such as countries in Asia. And this is also comes with a combination of another driver that has to do with the emerging trade restrictions in the recipient countries, starting with China and followed by other countries. Other drivers has to do with the uncontrolled transboundary movements of plastic that is taking place worldwide, and the lack of traceability and also the lack of the obligation of the exporting countries to demonstrate the environmental performance of the systems that they receive the materials for recycling. And in terms of compliance, what we most seen is that we have a weak enforcement of pollution controls in important countries, and also we have seen through this work that authorities of these countries, they lack the capacity to actually monitor the amount of waste entering their territories. And as already mentioned, a big challenge has to do with the fact that we lack a functioning market for secondary materials. Most of the materials that now are being traded around the globe is materials that the exporting countries cannot actually recycle in terms of economics. They are of low grade, they are mixed, they are unsorted, contaminated scrap plastic, and they are very costly, as I mentioned, to process, and they have a very little market value. And this is leading to transfer and transport these plastics in other countries. They have lower environmental controls, and the labor market is lower as well. And the secondary market for plastics and also for other recyclables is not actually exist, because the prices of these materials cannot actually compare the prices of the plastic, the virgin plastics. So it's obvious that there is no demand in the manufacturing market for these materials. And when it comes to waste management sector and transportation and technology, here we also have some flaws at the systems. We face challenges in the developed countries as well as in the emerging economies. In the developed countries, although we hold the technology, however, we don't have the capacity, or as I mentioned, the economics are not worthing to recycle materials of very low, of many impurities and very low. I will go on. And also the other thing is that although we have advanced technologies, we're looking a lot in the other technologies such as incineration, chemical recycling, sorting technologies, which is the core in order to come up with clean materials and also with homogeneous streams of plastic, which is very important in the industry. However, there are still shortfalls in the industry in the developing countries. And of course, as I mentioned, in the emerging economies, the technology that we treat our plastics is very, very low. What is more is that we are living in an era that we have an increased consumption trends of materials such as single-use plastics, which are not really easy to collect, which are not really easy to treat, and are materials that normally they are not stay for long in the market. They have lifetimes for 1 day or no more than 2 years. So in 2018, as already mentioned, the Chinese import restriction that was enforced, what was actually has done has highlighted this problem of the recycling sector. A lot of the materials in the developed countries have stored there for long periods. The plastic belts have been deteriorated and degraded through weather conditions, and a lot of plastic pollution have raised in the form of micro and microplastic into the environment in these areas. For other materials, they have found illegal ways to be transferred to other countries or legal ways to transfer to other Asian countries neighboring China. And what we have seen for our study is when it comes to these countries that we have seen that this spillover phenomenon has occurred, meaning that from China a lot of plastic has entered neighboring countries, is that these countries are actually missing themselves their waste management systems to adequately treat these waste. So the trade of plastic scrap is very complex. And there are a lot of factors being involved, and there are many and much and very important environmental and social impacts related to it from the first stage of the transboundary movement, starting from the export countries. The plastic scrap there is moved from business to business and across these countries, and there are environmental impacts that related highly on greenhouse gas emissions and also leakage in the environmental of micro and microplastics. Then we pass this trust in other countries. There are trades that may move through different trusts in countries where we can have leakage of plastic through dumping, landfilling, or burning, and then this trade of plastic is moving and find the final destination to emerging economies placed in recycling facilities. Normally these recycling facilities are of low cost, of low technology, and in many instances they don't have any environmental regulations taken in accordance. So what's happening there is that we have found that approximately 5 to 20% of this important plastic scrap in emerging economies of the global south has no market value, and in this sense they either burned, landfill, or dumped. The other route that the rest of the plastic scrap is following is that it's getting, as I mentioned, in the plastic recycling facility. This is the major treatment option. Most of these are not very well regulated in environmental terms. We have phenomenon that plastic is burned in open air or in semi-open rooms where employers inhale toxic fumes of the plastic being burned. So we understand that the health and welfare of these people working in this unit is adversely affected from this treatment of plastics, and also not only their health in short and the long term, but also in terms of economic. We increase their household costs. They have to go to a doctor, they have to take the medicines. And in one term, when we have established informal recycling, this might we might think that this might improve the welfare of people in terms of better income. However, in the long term, we have also to see what are the impacts and the cost in the environment and the health of these people, and this is the most important. So to end my presentation, in this policy brief, we have 5 recommendations to tackle challenges of transboundary movement of the plastics and leakage of plastics into the environment. The first, very important, that was also the proposal and the amendment of the Basel Convention, has to do with stricter monitor of transboundary movement of the plastics in order to increase the environmental accountability of the plastic industry, It's very important that the countries that they export the waste will bring a more cleaner and more homogeneous plastics in the importing countries. And in order to do this, the export countries have to enhance sorting activities in their locations. Also very important on a global scale is to enhance end markets for secondary materials. This will increase and will enhance and improve better collections at source, and also better processes of plastic scrap. Regulations that will favor products manufactured from recycled materials can boost toward this direction. Another important aspect has to do with the design of the product before becoming waste, so that when it becomes waste, it will be easily to separate and better to recycle. And last but not least, we miss the knowledge and information to get informed decision making. So in order to do this, we have to assess the whole value chain of plastic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. It was very interesting, and you really covered a lot of ground and provided a lot of information. It was quite shocking to see that actually only 9% of the old plastic waste is recycled properly, and certainly the flaws in the recycling capabilities of many countries represent a key issue to address, to resolve also the issue of plastic scrap waste. Now, recently, there has been an operation conducted by several custom authorities in various countries. It's a presentation whose results will be announced in a few weeks. It was called the Matter 5. It's an operation that brought together a lot of customs authorities from Asia and from Europe, from the US. And was trying to, in a sense, disrupt the illegal movements of plastic. Now, we don't have yet the complete statistics and data regarding this operation, but the World Customs Organization shared with us a few preliminary results that will be further elaborated over the next few weeks. But it was clear that they seized a number of containers over the past few months, mainly talking about 2019. China had a number of illegal imports, and these illegal imports were coming from many parts of the world, but specifically also from countries in ASEAN. Predominantly was from Thailand, but then there were also imports from Korea, from India. There was actually a certain amount of imports also from Malaysia to China. And when we look also at the imports that were seized in the special autonomous region of Hong Kong, we saw that there were actually quite a lot of containers coming from Japan as well. One thing that was interesting is that there were seizures not only from shipping containers in ports, but there were significant amounts of seizures also on land borders, where containers obviously reach one port, but then try to reach the final destination on road. So the characterization of this trade, especially in relation to many ASEAN countries, is ASEAN countries are becoming more and more transit also of this illegal trade. And these are information that we actually obtain through the seizures. Seizures are indicators that are not perfect about the illegal trade. Obviously, a country that is very effective at blocking all illegal movements looks like having very high seizures, and looks like being a bigger problem than countries that don't make seizure. So we always have to interpret the seizure data with a pinch of salt, but they also give us an indication of where the trade is taking place. So this is why in this panel we wanted to have also representative of customs authorities, and specifically Thai customs, and that's why I'm particularly pleased to introduce Mr. Chawat Sarkul Warawit, Customs Technical Officer, professional level in the Enforcement Division of Thai Customs. He has a Master of Art, Criminal Justice Administration from Thammasat University and a Bachelor of Science from Thammasat University. So, Kun Ek, if that's okay, you're next.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today, my presentation is divided in two parts. The first one is background and statistics. The second one is I would like to share what we do to against waste trafficking in Thailand. And the last one, I would like to briefing in case study. Okay, let's start. In 2018, China, the world's biggest importer of waste. So, okay. In 2018, China, the world's biggest importer of waste, introduced an importer ban on 24 types of solid waste. As a result of this ban, China, neighbor and certain African countries and Southeast Asia countries have increasingly found themselves targeted by shipper of illegal waste. So in Thailand, the plastic scrap import into Thailand is under Department of Industrial Work restriction. Since 2014, the number of plastic scrap import into Thailand is rising significantly from 68,000 tons to 571,000 tons in 2018 and decreasing in 2019. The turning point is China ban on solid waste, as I mentioned. And as a result of increasing the number of plastic scrap import to Thailand. However, import amount of plastic scrap decreasing in year 2019 is due to the more strictly control and the restriction. From Seizures case statistic, the number of cases is rising significantly from year 2016 to 2018. Okay, thank you. From 9 cases to 99 cases, the amount of this plastic waste increasing from 349 tons in year 2016 to 3,739 tons in 2018. The most often come from European countries and United States. And also Thailand is origin, transit, and export country too. In the second part, I would like to share what we do to against waste trafficking. To against illegal waste, Thai Customs do many measures, such as improving risk management system by using open source intelligence and sharing information between other custom administration in region and Regional Intelligence Liaison Office for Asia Pacific or LILO AP, and the World Customs Organization by using custom enforcement network and so on. In case of using X-ray scanner, since 2018, all suspicious container should be X-ray 100%. And for physical inspection, since 2018, all import plastic scrap should be inspected by physical inspection. And about the prosecution, by custom law, if offender agree to pay fine, is Director General or committee authority to waive the prosecution. But since year 2019, the Director General is issued a decree that all waste trafficking offender should be executed, and the penalty is 10 years in prison. Thai custom believe that measure should be deterrent criminal and can stop organized criminal activity. About how we manage our seized goods, in case of uncleared waste, it will be re-export to origin country, and in case of a seized waste, it will be disposal or re-export. The last part is case study. In June 2018, 4 plastic waste containers were detected at Rakabang Inland Cargo Depot in northern of Bangkok. Thai Custom investigate this case and share the crew to the police and lead to the investigate and search 16 recycle plants, and 19 companies were investigated by police. I cannot say it's definitely because the case is in process by police. Finally, the waste trafficking is the transnational environmental organized crime, lucrative business with devastating consequence for human health and the environment. Thai Custom has a strong intention to protect our beloved country from waste trafficking, and we believe that if we work together, we can construct a prosperous, clean, and beautiful world together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kunek, and that was extremely useful because in a sense now we can understand also from the perspective of the frontline officers how challenging it is also to identify the illegal shipments and act upon them. Now, it was quite telling that Thai customs, I suppose is the customs law, punishes with up to 10 years in prison those who are responsible for the illegal movements of plastic. Just to put it in perspective, according to, I would say, international standards set by the UN, penalties that are, where the maximum penalty is above 4 years, it's already considered a serious crime. And in the case of Thailand with the customs law on plastic movements, we're talking about 10 years. So that's quite interesting to determine the sort of awareness that Thailand is trying to generate over this issue. And it was interesting also to hear a representative from customs that starts framing the issue of illegal movements of plastic scrap as a form of transnational organized crime. And that's already an issue that I briefly mentioned at the beginning of this session. In the past, we've done also some research with UNEP to try to quantify also the amount, the value of the waste illegal trade. And certainly these are statistics that need to be updated because, as we said, after 2018, with the change of regulation in China, there is a change in the also illegal dynamics, the criminal paths. So that's certainly an area that needs to be analyzed further. So thank you again, Kunek, for your presentation. At this stage, I was wondering whether maybe Mr. Kojima wants to complete. I know that you had few extra slides in your presentation.
Yeah. If you can show my slide. Thank you. After the China regulation was strictened, I had a lot of chance to talk with recyclers and also the government officers. And some of the officers and recyclers think that they do not want to invest in the sorting and pelletizing with pollution control facilities in Southeast Asia because they were afraid that China may loosen reduce the kind of trade barriers in the future. So there are such kind of expectation which prevent kind of investment by recyclers. I mean, if China opened the market again, then their investment in the kind of exporting countries may be kind of the deficit for them. So such kind of a situation had a kind of reduced the kind of investment in good facilities in 2018, I think. But I feel that China will not change the policy. And also the Basel Convention amended the annexes of the plastic waste. And so exporting countries also should have a kind of investment to sorting out and clean up and so on. Otherwise, it will become difficult to export plastic waste. The amendment will be effective since January 2021. So it takes a time, but before that, each country should invest in the good facilities about the sorting, washing, and maybe pelletizing and so on. So, yeah, there are some, even we call the plastic waste, there are several types of the plastic waste. Some are clean and homogeneous one, but some are mixed or dirty one. So we should consider what kind of plastic waste can be traded freely, and what kind of plastics can be controlled under prior notice and consent, and what kind of plastics cannot be traded, and so on. So such kind of difference should be taken into account. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you for these useful additions. And now I would like to move to our two discussants in the panel, starting with Mr. Jayaprakash Muralidharan, Principal Assistant Secretary at the Ministry of Energy, Science and Technology and Environment and Climate Change of Malaysia. He is also responsible for monitoring progress on a number of national processes in Malaysia, related, for instance, to the Montreal Protocol, but also to the National Environmental Quality Monitoring Program. He holds a Master on Science in Sustainability Studies from the University of Glasgow, and he has a bachelor degree in chemical engineering. So, Mr. Jayaprakash, can you share some of your thoughts, especially considering your role at national level in Malaysia, and what are the key challenges to be tackled?
Thank you, Giovanni. Perhaps maybe it's, I used to be proud seeing Malaysia ranked #1 in so many so many cases, but not today. As rightly pointed out, over the past 18 months, things have taken a bit of aggressive changes in terms of policy and enforcement in Malaysia following the rise of illegal plastic factories in Malaysia. It started with actually the chronology of events that took place in Malaysia was actually due to certain air pollution incidences and complaints of water pollution in Malaysia. Since June 2018, actually, the Department of Environment received approximately about 13,000 to 15,000 complaints of water pollution and air pollution. Realizing from that, as enforcement increased, we realized there were a high volume or increase of illegal plastic factories in Malaysia. And I think as all of us are aware, this has been increasing since I think around 2017-18 when China started banning this importation of plastics, right? And as we started going in and seizing and closing those factories and all, we realized it kept on mushrooming. If it wasn't in this state, it went to another state. And we had the buy-in from top management to actually seize those factories and make sure no increase of those number of factories. However, the factories kept on rising. That is when we started to look at the whole value chain. Where are the plastics coming from? So we went into the ports. But like similarly to other countries in this region, in Southeast Asia, going after going to the port requires multi-agency cooperation and multi-stakeholders, multi-ministries, different agencies, and it wasn't as easy as just stopping those importation of these illegal plastics. As we were trying to follow the footsteps of China, I think it's quite hard because our value of plastic industry itself is approximately about 8 to 9 billion US dollar. So we had to actually not be disrupting the legal factory operators. But at the same time, we were going very, very harsh and aggressive towards the importation of plastics. Okay, what I would like to show you here is these pictures are at the site, at the factory site, location site. And this picture shows the support that we actually got from, following the change of government. We had a very young, vibrant minister. Through her support, things started moving very, very aggressively in Malaysia. There were changes. There were, I would say, assault from the agencies against the illegal operators. That brought a lot of changes. However, it wasn't as easy as seems to be. Hello? Okay. Seems to be. Next, please. I'd just like to show you the other picture where, okay. Next. Okay, when she came down personally to the port, that was where we got the support of the port authorities themselves. We were able to actually identify there were about 199 containers being seized. Please bear in mind, those were just seized. And returned, we were only able to return about 10 of them back to the country of origin. We are still going aggressively, and we have actually addressed this to relevant country of origin. The ambassadors we have met, we have conveyed our concerns, and etc. What we would like to I would like to point out here, spot on as stated by my colleagues here on the floor, we realize that the developed countries equally plays a very, very important, significant role in ensuring that the developing countries do not receive non-homogeneous plastics. It is not only the role of us to actually have a very strict, coordinated multi-agencies and have a better regulation, which Malaysia is going on board with, but our concern is that it is a transboundary issue, which it has to actually stop from the source of the country itself. It's quite shocking to see the list of countries that we have with us, where it came from and the country of origin. So we would like to actually emphasize the importance of developed countries to equally do the, as pointed out by my colleague from Japan earlier, to invest in your facilities to actually have proper segregation of those plastics coming in. While the developing countries like Malaysia right now, we are also emphasizing the importance of us to have a stringent regulation. And while Basel is coming in, and I think it enforced in 2021, we are also right now going ahead of the schedule to ensure that the authorities are in place to understand how to control the importation of the waste at the relevant ports. So I'll stop there for now. If I were to talk, I think I can go whole day on Malaysia's challenges and problems. And perhaps that's for now, Giovanni. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Jaya Prakesh. And yes, probably in this data that I just received from the World Customs Organization about this operation Demeter, I should have also mentioned that some of the countries of origin are in Europe, for instance, and I see here a list in no particular order mentioning countries like France, Spain, Germany, UK, as origin of containers with illegal waste inside. And as you said, it's a transnational issue that requires transnational solutions, and therefore it's really important that countries of origin, transit and destination actually develop a common strategy. It's a problem that is affecting more countries, and there is an issue of shared responsibilities to be discussed further. I would like now to pass to the second discussant of the day, Mr. Panet Manomavibol, assistant to the president at the Wong University. The Wong University is based in the north of Thailand in Chiang Rai. And Mr. Panet holds a PhD in engineering and a master in environmental management and policy from Lund University in Sweden, a master in public administration from York in the UK. He's leading a research center called Circular Economy for Waste-Free Thailand, and which is very much focused, from what I understand, on the management of hazardous waste in household context. And yes, we are actually very interested to hear your perspective on the issues that we have discussed so far.
Thank you, Giovanni, and good morning, everyone. We honor to be here and sharing my observation with you. So maybe I would just use a short amount of time for my first round. But actually, before working on household waste in general, after I coming back from Sweden, actually, I would like to draw some similarities of my previous topic before I working on plastic waste, before I working on waste electrical and electronic equipment. And actually, it kind of appalling to see that this kind of circle coming back, this kind of discussion kind of remind me of what happened with e-waste. About 10 years ago, we have unbalance between policy aspiration in developed country to collect and recycling. There are a lot of targets being set, many extended producer responsibility, EPR, that actually my PhD topic has been developed to retrieve electronic waste from household, from the institute. But then we don't really invest a lot in the recycling capacity. And all these waste has been exported. In 2002, if you still remember, there was a case in China called Guyu, which actually led to a ban of electronic waste import to China. Of course, it's not as effective as it is now with the plastic waste, but it's causing the same problem. Waste has been flowed to other countries in Asia who have kind of semi-capacity to recycling it, but with a lot of environmental pollution. So first, I would like to start my discussion with some prediction that I hope it will turn out wrong in the future. If it continue like electronic waste, the next stop of this tour of plastic waste will go for Southeast Asia and maybe to Africa. And I really hope that it will be wrong. It will not like that this time. But the same pattern start to happen. Ban in China, many Asian countries start to get tough on import of waste, but it's piecemeal, it's fragmented. We still far from being circular economy. One number that I think now everyone in this room remember very well is number 9. We only 9% circular in our economy. And this problem will not be solved as long as we still at that level. But I have some glimpse of hope when it comes to the boundary movement of plastic waste, because actually when it comes to plastic waste, I think in Africa, compared to 10 years ago with electronic waste, there is actually high awareness in Africa about plastic. I like storytelling method that Nadia used in the morning. I have one friend working in the tourism industry, and he just had a retreat to Africa. And one thing he posts on his social media is that it's so good to get away. And I'm quite ashamed because actually his work is based in Thailand. And he said that this is one time that he had a vacation on the beach and he didn't see plastic. And that in Africa. So I hope that this awareness will continue when it comes to this, import and export. So I hope that my prediction would be wrong on that aspect. But I think we also need to have mechanism at the international level to guarantee that it would not repeat the same mistake with the electronic waste. Because once it goes to that continent, it's even worse than, coming to Asia. And that brings to the second point. I would like to leave for the further discussion because I think we have more time for the discussion. How can we increase the capacity? I think all my colleagues here, we agree on one thing, that we have problem because we don't have enough capacity. So although we want to recycle a lot of waste, when it comes to policy, we set collection target, we set recycling target, but it's not actually recycling target. It's more like collect to be recycled, but we allow export to a certain extent. How can we really drive the circular economy? Back then when I worked on EPR, there was one issue that we think relevant for the Transboundary movement. If we really want the producer, the consumer to be responsible, we cannot have a backdoor that allow for cheap option for waste to be leaked from the system. We actually need traceability. Personally, I am not in the position to saying that we should ban completely, but if we really want to have a regional flow of material, then we want not only the material that come to other countries, but we want also capital, knowledge, and infrastructure. Unless we have that, then we should not content with this amount of waste, flowing from one country to another, because otherwise we end up with pollution heaven, and I don't think anyone in this room would like to have that. So I mark the end of my first round here, and hopefully we can discuss a little bit more of what can drive it forward in the further discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kumpanet. And thank you also for bringing up the issue of circular economy and the fact that a 9% circular economy is certainly not enough, and neither at country level, even worse at global level. So investments in developing proper and efficient circular economies seems to be the way to go to reduce also the illegal trade of plastic. But this is the moment where probably we would like to hear a little bit more also from the audience, from all of you here. So I would kindly ask you to introduce yourself when you want to ask a question or make a comment. And maybe we can start from here.
Good morning. I would say it might be good afternoon. My name is Steve Wong. I'm representing China Square Plastic Association. I'm also a UN observer to Basel Convention. And I have been in the recycling business for more than 35 years. So I'm actually a recycler. I'm very happy to share my thought with everybody here who are mainly probably not from our industry. I would like to say a few things about the panelists just share with me or with us. First of all, I would like to say in our plastic recycling about technology, Southeast Asian countries, in fact, have a lot of technology. And today, recycling is not only about recycling, or recycling is actually about collection, separation, and actually put the scrap into the machinery, into different plastic recyclable or recycled pellet. And the other thing is, in plastic, we have more than 42,000 different types. When I say this number, lots of people might not be aware that today we're only familiar with PE, PP, PS, ABS, or PVC. In actual fact, in our industry and also in post-consumer waste, we in fact have a lot of different kind of material, especially example is automobile industry. In order to achieve the specific requirement of in terms of characteristic, chemically and also mechanically, we need to make our plastic, we call it compound, specifically for a specific purpose. So we have so many different type of material. Okay, I don't want to go too detailed about this thing. Tomorrow I will have a speech about plastic, about global trade, and I hope you can join me. And what I want to say, come back to this topic about so recycling in a Far East. In fact, today we have technology like near-infrared to separate different materials through, I would say, spectrum. We also have electrostatic, and these are not expensive. And I also want to point out that China will not be allowed to import again for scrap plastic for many different reasons. I have been representing China to the EU meetings regarding recycling of waste, solid waste. So the message I get from the authority in my lifetime, okay, it won't happen. China will import scrap again. Yeah. And secondly, I also would like to say, just now the officer from Thailand, I'm so sorry that the name is too long for me to pronounce. We are talking about like illegal import, or we call it waste trafficking. And in fact, now I understand that why, Giovanni, you are involved, in this waste, because we talk about law, we talk about waste trafficking. It's the first time I heard about this wording, especially in this event. My understanding is notification, like from Europe. So just now you mentioned about the lots of import, okay, mainly from developed country, from the state, and also from Europe. Yeah. So as far as plastic scrap is concerned, we need notification before we export. So if we need notification, right, we probably will have like certain control of the material as well as notification about receiving countries, factories who will be processing it, and also exporting country who might have the assessment whether these goods will be allowed to export or not. So this is another thing. And I also would like to say something about Malaysia. I'm actually have a meeting with Yang Mei-ling, okay, sometime last year about plastic waste importation. I think she also mentioned about, we both agree about, in our business, right, it's not a level playing field. In other words, okay, it costs more money for somebody that will want to recycle correctly. At the same time, this is very, very competitive business environment. And the last thing I want to share, because this is too much, okay, I want to share about, why there's a lot of waste, and at the same time, I think lots of people may not be aware that there are also lots of capacity. When I say capacity, since China finished with the importation of plastic scrap, lots of recyclers moved to Southeast Asian countries. And I believe that there's more than 25,000 recyclers, small and big ones. You probably agree about these things. Malaysia probably is one of the most popular spots. And with these 25,000 recyclers in Southeast Asian countries, imagine each factory have a capacity of like 300 tons per month. That translates to 7.5 million tons per month capacity. And at the same time, developed countries have lots of scrap material available. And this scrap needed to be recycled, and the capacity that we have, they're not matching. We are in a very dynamic situation where there's, on one hand, we have excess of waste, and also the 9% we are talking about. I actually have my doubt, this 9%, how you come up. Probably one time there's somebody, maybe some competent body say this 9%, then in the end, everybody talk about 9%. Even me, I also talk about 9%. And the other number I want to mention is about ocean waste. It's about 10 million tons. But just now, we saw the scrap available is only 7 million tons. And we also have to focus on post-consumer, post-industry, post-petrochemical. I think at this moment, there are lots of scrap being recycled in-house. I think the problem we have in waste, I like Maria, always say scrap, but actually there is a difference between scrap and waste. And I like to say this is scrap, okay? because it's recyclable. And I think, okay, in waste or scrap, okay, the only thing that, that we have problem, right, to me is two stream. One is post-consumer, that is really mixed. The other one is the residue. Yeah, and with the residue, I know Malaysia very well that, for the fact, I think somebody mentioned about V material. I'm going to, one more minute, okay, then I finish, okay. V material, I think with V material, the thing that people recover is only PS, ABS, PE, PP. The rest, so far, nobody recycled them. There's no single material that cannot be recycled. It's a matter of money. So I think what we need is a system to finance, to have it financially motivated for the recycler to recycle. And top of recycler, I think the recycler objective is to make money. Otherwise, they cannot survive. I don't believe an NGO will be able to handle this kind of quantity. Lastly, I want to say, I'm in a situation that, I support Basel Convention Amendment, I support regulation, but I'm also a recycler. You don't see many recyclers speaking out, to the public, and also, for me, I'm also a public speaker. And as I have many years of experience, this is what I like to share my thoughts. I care about the environment, but I also care about recyclers, how they make their money. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wong.
Wong. Steve Wong.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wong. I think that you were adding rather some additional comments to the floor. I don't think that there was a specific question. So maybe I can ask somebody else to ask questions or pose comments, please. I think you have a microphone in front of you.
My name is Amit Jain. I'm a researcher and also as a consultant on a number of plastic projects in the region. Earlier in the presentation, one of the panelists had shown 9% recycling rate. I just wanted to check how much Europe accounts for that under 9%. Considering Chinese ban also, prior to ban, zero landfill discharge countries, some European countries, what had been the policy initiative in those countries post Chinese ban on import of plastic waste? Are they still accumulating, or are they trying to send it across through different countries? Has there been an effort to improve their own recycling industry? Any policy initiative in this regard? It will be good to learn from their experience.
Yeah, I think so. There is a nice figure of global recycling rates that I don't have it with me right now. But the thing is, when it comes to plastic or recycle, it's very difficult to identify this rate when it comes to country by country. So I'm coming from Europe. They do have sufficient recycling programs in place. That's what we actually say to the rest of the world. But my experience is that although some countries of the North Europe, they perform well and they have good source separation systems in places, there are other European countries who are hardly doing well in source separation. We do get a lot of mixed. We have source separation for recyclable materials, but we do get a lot of impurities inside. It seems that the people, they don't have the initiatives and they don't know how to better recycle. Europe has enforced legislations on the proper waste management many decades before on this directions. They are setting higher recycling targets. Last year we have renewed the Waste Framework Directive, setting higher targets for recyclable materials and for specific streams, also for plastic packaging, setting higher the limits on that. Some countries are prepared, other countries are totally very behind on that. I'm coming from Greece. We are 10 years behind. We cannot reach the targets. 80% of our waste only being recycled. I'm not mentioning plastic. I mean the total recycling rate. And the reason is that we don't have source separation systems in place. The people don't know how to recycle. There are not incentives, not even for the people, but also for the industry. In place, there are some efforts of the plastic industry to do more on plastic recycling. So yes, Europe is doing, and around the world also, US is trying. But it seems that we haven't been prepared. We are not prepared. I mean, and this was obvious with the Chinese ban in 2018 that we weren't prepared for this, and we have to find to put the regulation in place. A Basel Convention is going to work to this direction, and we want to find our steps to be able to recycle more and also invest more in the industry, the recycling industry. Source separation is very important, very, very, very important. Much, Mr. I cannot recall, I observed there are a lot and different types of plastics. Of course, there is a technology, and we can recycle almost everything, either mechanical recycling or chemical recycling. We can do everything, but we need the money for that. Source separation is very, very important to have clean and homogeneous materials in place. There are a lot of difficulties and challenges that we have to overcome, even in the developed work. And as you already mentioned, it's very important that what we export to other countries, it's our responsibility. So I hope I answered a little bit your questions or some of.
Okay, please, yes. Another question from Interpol.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Giovanni. I'm Benedict Neal from Interpol, working on pollution enforcement, including waste trafficking. Actually, I wanted to add on your questions, because we at Interpol we are conducting a risk assessment, and we are looking at all this illegal trade in plastic waste, and we asked ourselves what are the reasons of this whole flow of plastic going from Europe to Asia, which is one of the main routes main trade routes that we are observing. And the thing is that we have to be not mistaken about is that there is a demand for the plastic waste coming from Europe. There is a demand in Asian countries as well. I'm talking right now about legal trade, but there is a demand. And this, for example, in Malaysia, we had met your colleagues a few weeks ago. We met your colleague Fanny. Anyways, in Malaysia there is a rule, regulation that recycling companies should recycle minimum 30% of their domestic waste. And this shows that at least 70% is imported waste. And the reason is that the imported plastic waste is usually respond to sorting out criteria and constraints that are higher than what the domestic sorting out system allows. So there is an issue of consumption and generation of plastic waste in Europe, which is true, but there is the sorting out system, and it's a market at the end. There is money, and it's a supply chain, a supply-demand chain that is in place, and there is also this demand from Asian countries. But actually what we asked countries in our threat assessment is also regarding the illegal trade. Why export countries? You said earlier, Mr. Muralidharan, sorry if I butcher your name, you said earlier that there is a shared responsibility from export countries to also try to limit containers, illegal containers leaving their countries. And we try to ask export countries such as Spain, UK, Netherlands, which are like in the top 5 of export countries for plastic waste, what are the reasons, what are their challenges? And they said that the first challenge is, of course, a political and enforcement priority, which actually Malaysia helped a lot by making it a political issue, and with your minister, it helped a lot European countries to raise more their attention towards the containers leaving their countries. Then saying that it's difficult for export countries to have visibility on the regulations in place in import countries. So because plastic waste right now in the Basel Convention is not considered hazardous waste, so there is not always a PIC, prior informed consent, that is required. There is no, the regulation change according to the country. And for example, Cambodia has a ban on the import of plastic waste, but the import of plastic scrap is legal. So it's really hard for customs looking at a shipment and say, oh, this is plastic scrap, or this is plastic waste, etc. And there is a lot of new regulations coming into place since the China ban in Thailand, in Malaysia, etc. There is a lot of new regulations, and from the export countries' perspective, they just don't have the visibility on all the new regulations that are in place. So I have one question finally, sorry for being long, for maybe in your perspective in import countries, Thailand, Malaysia for example, as you are here, how do you communicate outside to export countries, or how do you communicate on your new regulations coming into force in your country to make sure that export countries, they have visibility on that so they can enforce accordingly? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So basically, I would like to put it very clear to you. The reason why the minister is actually politicizing this is because the players that are involved in exporting are actually prominent developed country who were advocating environmental management improvement globally. So when our way right now first is to strengthen our domestic regulations first. How we are going about it is actually politicizing, or not, I wouldn't say we are politicizing or maybe politicizing is the word, politicizing the issue itself. Okay, the platforms that we are using to politicize this issue is through various platforms in ASEAN and also in UNEP and in any other platforms. That is one. Second thing is to, as you mentioned just now clearly, it is true. We are actually harmonizing our conduct in controlling the importation of waste at our ports and all with the relevant countries by personally, my minister is actually meeting the ambassadors themselves, because some of them clearly, as you said very clearly, they do not understand what is the code of importations. What they can't really interpret clearly what is the code of importation in our country, and we ourselves having the misinterpretation of the codes within authorities. And having said that, actually, what's happening right now and what's going to happen in the next 6 months or what in Malaysia is actually, we would be announcing soon the National Action Plan for Importation of Plastic Scraps, which should be completed by early next year. That is the first approach of Malaysia. How we are conveying this to the exporters is through these platforms, like for example right now, one of it, and also through our foreign affairs explaining to the embassies to actually channel this information out. It is not as clear, as simple as us informing them directly via letter, via this thing, and it's these informal sessions that is important for us to convey what's happening. As clearly mentioned by everyone around here, it is the legitimate business and all brings in great revenue to the country. It's just that the illegal importation and all is a bit of concern of us. And as what we are also emphasizing here is that apart from harmonizing the custom codes, the codes in this region, Malaysia is also emphasizing in all the platforms to actually start looking at having a legal instrument to control this in this region, in ASEAN first. Yeah, that is what our main, we are advocating that, and we are trying to move forward with that agenda in these coming years. So hopefully that answers your question. Thank you.
So you basically tend to develop a sort of ASEAN-wide policy on the legal instrument, sort of a treaty.
Yeah. Why we are looking at that is that I think ASEAN faces two environmental problems. One is the haze, another is this. So in ASEAN itself, it is important for us to go. It could be quite hard for us to implement a legal instrument in this country with our ASEAN spirit. But having that in place itself, going towards drafting that in place itself would steer a discussion towards having a legal instrument to control this kind of movement. Only then we can actually start identifying what are the constraints of countries' issues in importing them at the relevant authorities, ports and all.
Okay, there is really time, I think, only for one last question, as we are running a little bit of time. So maybe we try here first.
I am Anandam Sanyal and I represent Affectus AB, Swedish company. Now, my question was to the panel that is specific data monitoring done with respect to the energy consumption of plastic waste which is being collected and again recycled for the end product? Because when you are thinking of that specific value chain or maybe the circular economy, I think the specific data in regard to the energy which is consumed should also be looked upon. Any thoughts on that? Because I have attended the Malaysian Nordic Forum meet last month only, where this was a very big question. So is something is being done on the world front or UN front? Thank you.
Did you want to ask the question to someone in particular?
No, it's the panel because it directs to all the plastic involvement of waste and then recycling of that particular in the economy.
Anyone who feels, anyone from the panel?
Okay. Actually, that good point that you raise about the data on energy also for the plastic. But I don't think, based on our discussion right now, we are that advanced to have that data, because even the source and the type of plastic or the quality, which is kind of basic to have sound industry, we still kind of lacking. So having another layer of data that would be added, I think that would be a big challenge. But I would like to take this opportunity to add a little bit more on, because I think the plastic recycling is here to stay. And the other thing that I think is unlike 10 years ago with electronic waste is that not only in Africa, but the awareness here in Southeast Asia is also quite high. And many countries setting the target, setting the measure to have not just reduction, but source segregation, and trying to develop the industry. But I think we need more than like 25,000 recyclers, because we need also related industry connected to those who kind of make intermediate product. Because we not just want to be the best of, process it a little bit, and like what Kojima-san showed, and then it's sent back to the industry in China. I think we also need the industry in this country. Yeah, the connected industry. And just to end my comment, as a educational institution like the university, I think we also responsible, and we need to do better. We have material engineering program at our university, and now we are revising it. And when we review many of similar programs, we realize that we only teach students mainly on how to work with virgin material, and that need to be changed. We need to prepare the new generation, not just recycler, but those who design the product and those who select the material, to think more about how can we use secondary material. Otherwise, it would not match up with all the aspiration we need for recycling. So that's what I would like to comment. Maybe Kojima-san.
I think there are several studies about the impact to the energy consumption of the recycling, and basically life cycle assessment technology kind of method is applied to analyze such kind of the energy consumption or CO2 emission, and they show that it is good for environment. I mean, recycling can be reduced energy consumption.
I see that there is one more burning question, actually two, and we are ready after time. So can I just ask to be extremely concise with the question and avoid further commenting and just go straight to the question, please?
Amit Jain again. Well, in the context of energy footprint of the plastic industry, and in this context, is waste to energy option still being considered in Europe to take care of plastics which is not recyclable? Because recycling of plastics has got its own limitation, maybe first cycle or second cycle of recycling.
Sorry, can you repeat the question, because I'm not sure I understood it.
Is waste to energy option is still considered as viable in Europe, considering non-recyclability of certain plastics?
I think since I'm from Europe, this question comes from me. Okay, you know that we have this pyramid for different waste treatment options in Europe, and we also have this circular economy policy in place that we give a lot of emphasis. First, trying to gain that we want to reserve the resources. The first option is when it comes to any type of material that we want first to try minimize, of course, the consumption. Second, when there is the prevention in this, and also the recycle. So mechanical recycle is up more in the hierarchy, and then comes the energy recovery. Energy recovery has been utilized in Europe. There are a lot of countries that they use incineration, but most from what it comes the rest of the materials of the waste that we cannot recycle or recover in order to have useful materials, secondary materials. Also there, along with incineration, the last years there have been a lot of developing the chemical recycling, which has come as a new form of closing the loop in the circular economy, taking chemical substances from plastic and entering into the cycle of materials. Yeah, the incineration could be an option, but in Europe it is the last option.
Thank you. This is Yoshinori Suga from Embassy of Japan in Thailand. As the panelists discussed, I think now we are in a transition period against the shock in 1970 and 18. And there are many initiatives like the ban amendments of the Basel Convention, and big companies, global companies are shifting from the plastic use, maybe by replacing or substituting the use of plastic. And also the governments are also doing many things now. So the question is, what would the whole picture look like after settling down? And if we have some goal, or if we have some desirable situation, do you think are we on the right track? Will we see any gaps between the desirable situation and the BAU scenario? That's the question. Thank you.
So that's a very difficult question, in fairness. Probably one that cannot be answered. I don't know, unless some of the speakers want to answer. Maybe.
I will try a little bit. Basically, plastic recycling is competing with kind of plastics made from oils also. I mean, if some countries prohibit the import at all, then probably the investment in recycling industries may not be stimulated. I mean, the investment may decrease. because sometimes the price of the plastic waste or waste papers fluctuate a lot if the small country. So demand and supply gap might be happened. So I think it is better to allow some part of the waste. If you can make a condition like a clean one or something like that. But otherwise, maybe the recycling industry cannot make an investment. Yeah, I mean, you should think about how to promote recycling industry in country. And one of the options is somehow you should allow the kind of import of recyclable waste. Otherwise, and allow the import of the recyclable waste. Otherwise, recycling industries may not want to invest a lot. So that is my impression. Thank you.
And really, I think I see. I'm sorry, but I see at least 2 or 3 more questions, and we are already 10 minutes after the time. So I don't want to be really the person between you and lunch for too long. So if you forgive me, I would like just to wrap up at this stage. I think that this session was extremely useful to try to understand what are some of the complexities that we are going to discuss over the next 4 days. Probably this session was more useful to understand what some of the issues are, and probably by the end of this conference, maybe on Thursday, on day 4, we will be able to discuss more also the solutions. Here what we've heard is that there are certainly economic interests at stake. We are talking about revenues for the state, but at the same time risks for the health of the population, risk for the environment. We're talking about the complexity of really informing, sharing correct information between the exporting, transit and importing countries. We talked about the key role of recyclers and the fact that this is a legitimate industry with probably 99.9% of actors from the private sector that are actually conducting a perfectly clean work, but then there may be always the risk of somebody trying to take advantage of the loopholes in the legal framework, in the differences in the legal framework among countries. So there is a need of remaining vigilant on the possibility of actors that are trying to circumvent the regulations in place to make illegal money, generate illegal profits that can be invested in further illegal activities. Now, a lot that was discussed today, probably too much to digest before lunch, but as we said, we have 3.5 days to spend together, and certainly we will manage to focus more on the solutions as well. So with this, I would like to thank the speakers and the discussants of the day. It was extremely useful. It was a pleasure to meet you all. Thank you to the participants, and thank you to the UN Environment for organizing this event. I now give the floor back to Nadia.
A round of applause, please. Thanks once again to Mr. Broussard and all of the participants of this discussion. And now I get to be the one between you and lunch. Just want to share with you that we have 2 parallel sessions coming up after lunch. In this room, it's towards better data, monitoring, assessment, and related technologies. And then in meeting room G on level 1 downstairs, we invite you to join a discussion on governance frameworks to manage marine plastics. And then after the parallel sessions, we will have a coffee break and then come back into this room for a joint session on chemicals and plastics. Again, do use the app. We really suggest that you do, and you can find out more details there. And just a comment on Kun Panate's story on Africa before you leave. Africa is actually where my heart is. I mean, of course, Indonesia as well, but I do a lot of work aside from this on elephants and conservation. And in Africa, I don't know if you know, but in Kenya, they've just imposed a $40,000 fine for plastics import, manufacturing, or selling of plastic bags. So I'm not sure how that's working out for them, but it's quite interesting. And also, while I was in safari in Kenya, probably filming my documentary for the ivory trade, as we were on safari, the guide stopped the car when he saw a plastic bottle and got out and picked it up. And I just don't see that in Asia, and I think we have some lessons that we can all learn there, because each of us, as I said earlier, can be examples by picking up stuff wherever we see it, and then communities learn, and then people understand that there's no place for plastics aside from where they're meant to be. Thank you all, enjoy lunch, and I'll see you back soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Right. Thank you. I'll try to pronounce your name correctly. Perfect. Close enough. Thank you very much for that. Thank you.
You're from Malaysia?
Yeah. Thank you. Yes. I feel that we could have talked for another hour, but lunchtime.
No, you haven't.
Yes.